I was going to start with the It's Our Time Suzy Cato tune that I recall from my childhood, but I'm simultaneously not that great in the memory department as far as that's concerned, but also not a great singer. So I think we can probably go, hello, g'day, ke te pihea koe, or ke te pihea koutou, to how are you all doing? Morena Hannah, I hope that you are all having a wonderful Thursday. As my notes tell me, as somebody made a point of mentioning yesterday, I can confirm that today is Thursday the 9th of April. Tomorrow is Good Friday, but I also want to acknowledge, as was put out there in a Facebook post by my mate, Asher Wilson Goldman, who lives on Kapiti Coast, that yesterday was the start of Passover, which is obviously a Jewish tradition. And there'll be a lot of people at this time of a ton of different denominations and backgrounds and communities who are having to sacrifice their traditions, their times of coming together at the moment while we are all in lockdown trying to break the chain of transmission and to save lives. And I guess it just calls for all of us to be really conscious of how at this point in time during our lives and in the tune of this year, annually, we would usually be coming together with our whānau and friends. So it's probably a good moment to reflect and go, hey, what are we actually going to do as people to make sure that we schedule some time over tomorrow, over Saturday, Sunday, and potentially Monday, depending on your schedules, to touch base with your whānau and friends, and to do that in a new way using the magic of the internet. You know, if you have the, I would say, fortune or bad fortune, if you have the situation or the setup such that you can watch me in the mornings doing these, then you have the ability to connect via video with your friends and your family. And that is a really cool privilege. So make sure you use the best of that. And if any of you have any cool ideas about how to connect with friends and whānau during this time, make sure you share it in the comments below, because we'll obviously make sure we amplify those really cool ideas as well. A few people have been commenting, Azaria, and we've also had Frederick saying Bernie Sanders ending his presidential bid and dropping out. So first and foremost, important to note that what happens in America, while it obviously has an impact with regard to international relations and setting cultural trends and otherwise, we have to be cautious, and I particularly do have to be cautious as a parliamentarian in Aotearoa, New Zealand, not to accidentally wander into any diplomatic dramas. But I will say that I knew that I had chosen the right party in 2017 when at the end of 2016, when at the end of 2016, after I had lost the bid for local government elections, I decided to join the Green Party, throw my hat into the ring there, and to just push forward with the kaupapa of trying to build a more sustainable world and a more inclusive world. Donald Trump obviously won the presidency in the United States, and there was a motion across Parliament by the then national government, supported by every party in Parliament except for the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand, to send a motion of congratulations to President Donald Trump. And the Greens made a statement at that point in time, the co-leaders Materia Ture and James Shaw then, about how it probably didn't speak to the best of our values and the best of us to be complicit in the way in which certain people come to power, and the scapegoating and the xenophobia and the racism and the sexism and all of the isms, you know how it is. So just personal feelings here. This isn't on behalf of the Greens, but yes, personally I am gutted. I am such a personal Bernie fanboy that well before we went into lockdown, I purchased a t-shirt in support, and because it came all the way from America, it has been in customs, I presume, for this whole time, so I haven't got it. And in the month and a half since then, he's pulled out. The lessons that we can learn, however, and this is the lesson that I learned from my 2016 local body campaign, is that we may not win the battle, that being the electoral competition of the day, but that we can continue to push forward and to win the so-called war. I hate using war or fighting analogies, but here I have found myself on this live stream falling down that hole. And that it is far more important, I think, for a progressive candidate to have gone out there to have stated their values, to have been around the table of debate and to have pushed the conversation forward than to have not engaged at all. Because we're all far better off with those ideas in the public domain and that competition of ideas. And we can see that resonating with people's with the way that people are seeing different opportunities to change things, right? And you only need to look at such Netflix docos as that one, Knock Down the House, that followed a raft of different progressive candidates that were all backed by grassroots campaigns, the most famous of which is obviously Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But there is an opportunity for all sorts of so-called normal people to get into institutions of power and to change those institutions if we recognise as people and as communities our ability to impact them and to hold them to account. Frederick and Azaria, I'm gutted, but at the same time, we have to keep pushing forward in the stuff that is within our locus of control. Morena to Lincoln and Alza. I apologise if I'm saying your names wrong, by the way. I feel like the Pākehā teacher at the front of the classroom on the first day of school. Please do correct me. Finally up early enough to watch this. Yes. Morena to Katie, Linda, Kate, Rohina, to Jessica, and to Leiling, and also to Jill. Yeah, Jill, around the 4.4 earthquake in Christchurch. Oh man, can Christchurch catch a break, please? I so far have heard no news of anything, any form of damage or otherwise, but my heart goes out to all of you who are probably experiencing a huge amount of distress off the back of that. And the just blender of trauma and stress that all of you have been through over the last wee while. So please do let me know if there has been any damage or there is any requirement for any form of help or aid, because we will obviously be working as a government, as a parliament, and as people of citizens of this country to try and make sure that you aren't experiencing this stuff alone. But today I just wanted to speak to briefly, alongside building those new traditions around Easter, Passover, whatever your form of celebration is, that you may have seen yesterday that there was an announcement by the Education Minister that we are bringing Suzy Cato back to television, that old school medium. And Suzy Cato, if you're not aware, if you didn't have the fortune of growing up in Aotearoa, New Zealand as a millennial like myself, you may have missed the boat on that one, but I personally have a photo that my mum took of me at Auckland Zoo when I was a kid, probably, 5 or 6, of me and Suzy Cato, and I was stoked about that photo. I remember it very vividly in my mind's eye, even though it's at home in Auckland. In Tamaki Makaurau. Suzy Cato is, of course, an incredible New Zealand icon, a phenomenon, a legend. And she, alongside a raft of other talented, creative and intelligent folks who are used to working with kids, developing not only a curriculum, but a method of delivery that will engage tamariki and rangatahi around the country on matters of education while we are experiencing this lockdown. And that'll go live from Wednesday, I believe, next week. Wednesday, April 15th, for 6.5 hours every single day. So kind of following the track of your regular school day, so that kids don't need to be just entertained by iPads or Animal Crossing or whatever else they may be up to, but they can get some local, homemade, New Zealand made education and content, and again, this is why we need to be celebrating our educators. So I genuinely believe do the most important job in our society in helping to pave the way for the future of this country. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to learningfromhome.govt.nz. For kids who may not necessarily have access to devices or to the technology to access it, we have, as a government, sent out a package to make sure that every child across this country is able to engage. Patrick is asking, big supporter of the cannabis referendum, can you explain why hardware shops aren't classified as essential? That was a fantastic segue, Patrick. Hardware shops aren't classified as essential. So hardware shops, to my understanding, at the very least the big ones, are able to offer supplies to essential to people who are doing essential work in terms of capping off development that may otherwise be damaged by adverse weather or by rain or otherwise, but essentially this pertains actually to all of the ways that and rules that we have sought to develop the essential services kind of regulations to date. Is that we knew that we had to go fast and we had to go early, and that has started to pay off, as you've started to see in some of the data that has emerged over the past week in particular. However, we won't know how effective it has been and how obviously compliant all of us have been until the next week or so. But it is showing some really awesome signs, and it is cause for cautious optimism, but also for all of us to remember the importance of continuing to abide by those rules. But the reason we went fast and early and put that clamp down on the goods and services flow around this country was obviously to stem the tide of the flow of the virus. And in doing so, we have seen signs of success. But we also notably, and we're always upfront about this as a government and as a parliament, weren't going to get the 110% perfect mix or balance right. And as a result, there has been slight tweaks and changes as we have progressed and developed, and the COVID Cabinet Committee, which James Shaw, co-leader of the Greens, is on, is meeting pretty much every other day, and they are making decisions about those changes to the essential services. So with regard to that, just in terms of why everybody isn't necessarily able to engage in and purchase hardware goods, is that I'm also conscious of our awesome essential services of courier drivers and posties exposing themselves to the virus every time they move around the country. So again, we need to strike a balance here, and we always knew that it was going to be tough. A lot of us are going without some of the things that we would otherwise have, the things that we would otherwise like, but in turn it's all for the greater goods of this country. Zenith, is there a story behind this t-shirt? This t-shirt, no mate, this is another one of my business just black regular t-shirts. However, I guess the story behind this t-shirt is that I inherited it from my nana. My nana Karen, who's actually an interior designer, and one of the people who got me really interested in art and design when I was a lot younger. I have, interestingly enough, because we have very similar frames, inherited a lot, frames being our body shape, size, etc., inherited a lot of clothing from my nana, which is a very sustainable way to go about things, particularly if you're a Green Party MP preaching sustainability. Michael's saying he felt that quake. I hope you're all right, mate. Same Linda and Timothy. Frederick, I don't know if I'm wise. Josh, place categories over a video. Someone takes a photo of the lists and posts in group messenger chat and sets the timer. That is a great idea. This is from Josh, folks, one of those ideas about something that you can do during this rahui, this alert level 4 lockdown, to engage with your friends in whānau and do something fun over the Easter period or however your whānau celebrates. Jeremy, total BS, what's going on over there? I presume this is about the United States of America. I will leave it at that. Folks saying, that the Knock Down the House is worth watching. Avril is keeping in touch with family and friends via Zoom and Messenger and video calls. I'm really gutted that before going into lockdown, I didn't get more board games. I actually have no board games here, but I'm thankful that I do have a good sizable chunk of books to get through, which I normally never have the time to get through in regular life. Caleb, for those of you who don't know Caleb is a brilliant mind. Caleb Matthew, as he's noted here. Google Caleb Kane if you're interested in learning more about him. Sorry, Caleb, I'm now just going on a rant about you. But Caleb is stating Christchurch has been through a lot of hurt. Hope the quarantine hasn't been too bad for them. Caleb is a individual who, as a lonely, isolated guy, fell down a rabbit hole on the internet and into some white extremism, and came to realize how that behavior hurts other people and also was hurting himself. And as a result of that, has reformed and taken a public platform on trying to help other young men in particular get out of that rabbit hole. So there we just went on a segue on the dangers of extreme ideology. I just wanted to say in our final few moments together this morning, I've heard from a number of people asking about what comes next and how we work together to develop a better Aotearoa New Zealand, a more inclusive, a more community-oriented, an economy that works better for everybody after we come out of this pandemic and this lockdown in particular. And I guess my two very quick cents on this, because I will delve into it in greater detail over the weekend and the longer live streams, is it's probably important to know the history of how we ended up in this mess of prioritising GDP above everything else. GDP, the modern conception of it, was invented by this guy called Simon Kuznets and brought to the US Congress in the 1930s. And he was like, here, I've invented this awesome calculation to figure out the volume of transactions and the quantity of money in those transactions all across the country. But God forbid, do not use it as the measure of welfare, that was the term that he used, of welfare in the society. 70 years later, and we all were doing that. So GDP is simply a measurement of transactions. It is heavily flawed in that it does not measure the distribution of those transactions nor the quality of them. So a great example of how profoundly poor of a measurement it is that GDP goes up whenever there is a natural disaster, when somebody gets cancer, when there is a car crash, when there is an oil spill, because there has to be economic transactions in order to undo that social ill. Which brings us to the point that economics, and this has been critiqued by a huge amount of far smarter people than I, our way of prioritizing certain elements of the economy has seen us perhaps valuing and measuring the wrong things. And it was put really aptly by someone on Twitter, of all places, the other day, saying that the economy isn't closed right now, right? The economy isn't closed. In fact, the economy is just something that we build together, and it's about the stuff that we choose to prioritize and measure. We are still engaging in things like childcare, for example. We are still operating households. We are still connecting with each other. We are still producing value. It just so happens that there isn't the usual flow of money that accompanies that stuff. So those are some of the lessons that we can build on moving forward into how we build a better world. But again, I'll elaborate on it to greater detail moving forward. I hope that you all have a brilliant Thursday. Tomorrow I'm still working, so I'll be back at 8:10 on Friday, but on Saturday and Sunday, you will see me at 12 noon. So I'll see you all again tomorrow at 8:10. Remember to share below any of the ideas that you have about how friends and whānau can connect over what would normally be a good time to come together over Easter and otherwise. Kia ora team, catch you later.